I can't tell you how many times I've made horrible mistakes in my business that left me scars enough that the next time I was, given the same scenario, I changed my behavior. I actually learned.
Welcome to another episode of Grow with Evelyn. Today, I have the big honor to interview Kevin Wong. He has been helping me with reducing the churn of my Grow with Evelyn Skool community down from 20 all the way to below 5%. So today, we'll talk a lot about data-driven optimization in your business. We'll talk a lot about churn, how that translates beyond communities into all types of businesses. And while we do that, we'll also unpack Kevin's super interesting background because he's somewhat of a serial entrepreneur and I think has a lot of cool insight to share with us. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. I really appreciate being on the podcast and really happy to jump into all super nerdy things and hopefully help the audience with whatever problems that they're thinking about.
I love working with you so much because it is so much easier to commit to something if you have the data to back it up, right? So it makes it really, really easy to stick with things. Can you, before we kind of jump into the interesting patterns, things we see, can you give us a quick rundown of your entrepreneurial journey up until this point and how you landed in the place of reading community data to, help community owners grow faster?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started my business while I was working full-time in corporate America. So I basically worked almost a decade in the kind of 9 to 5 system. And basically when I was in the middle of that, I knew I always wanted to do entrepreneurship. So I always took jobs where I thought I would gain those skills. So basically I started my business, which was an escape room business, physically in person in 2015. I was still working full-time at that time. I went all the way to 2019 where I got my first 6-figure deal while working that job that allowed me to transition from my side hustle plus work to full-time entrepreneurship, working for my business in 2020, which was right before the pandemic. So I went from physical escape room to escape room in a box to a digital escape room to more broadly virtual events and virtual escape rooms, and then finally to Skool. So that's kind of the full gamut of a very long journey of 10 years in a few seconds.
That's so cool. How did running escape rooms help you actually in basically what you do right now for communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, escape rooms are all about problem solving. It's about gamifying an experience that should otherwise not really be fun, right? Like if you think about for those who aren't familiar with what an escape room is, it's basically the idea that you are locked in a room solving a series of puzzles and challenges. And if you can solve all the puzzles and challenges within a timer, 60 minutes, you escape and it's a blast. And so it's funny, you're literally locked in a room, the idea. So I always found that hilarious to me that is a thing, but it's really about the camaraderie that you build together with people you may or may not know, and you build rapport, solving puzzles and challenges. That is to be able to do that in a safe environment where you're not actually locked away is great. So I found that in Skool, it's similar. It's like starting a business. You're essentially, as an entrepreneur, locking yourself into a room of very difficult things, and you've got to find your way out, following all the directions and signs and working with the people around you. So to me, it is very much an allegory for business in general. And that's kind of how I like to think about making it fun.
I think it's such a cool analogy because I've played a few escape rooms in the past, and it's very similar to the situation I faced when my churn was really high in the community. It's the problem, you're kind of looking around in the room, and the first kind of, instinct is rating everything. And then in every escape room I was up until now, I was like, what the heck? There is literally no clue. There's literally nothing I can do. And I felt like that with the churn until we started to look into the data. And then, we started to gain kind of the first clues. And so I would love to hear from you when you are confronted with that situation, right? So you're helping a community or business owner in general with, I'm losing customers or I'm not seeing the growth that I want. What is kind of, when you rate the room, right? What are the first kind of draws that you pull out, or the first, how you would basically approach solving an escape room? How do you approach solving that puzzle? Where do you like to look first?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way I always think about it is trying to simplify the scenario that you're in to the most specific thing that you can. So what I noticed when we were running a bunch of escape rooms and playing a bunch, being a fan as well, is that there's so many things that could be the thing you need to do. But in reality, there's usually one thing you need to do next.
Mhm.
And I say figuring that out amongst your team is super important. So there's usually a person who is kind of delegating where they're looking. You would need to communicate where you are and what people have already done. So you can kind of whittle that down to get to that specific task. And for me, I would say in terms of the data, it's the same idea. It's usually a lot of noise. There's a lot of options. And for the way that we tend to think about solving those problems is what is the highest priority, most specific thing we can look at that is a good indicator of what to do next. So just really trying to focus on figuring out what that action is going to be.
That's so cool and helpful. So when you have all of that noise coming in, right? So you're kind of doing a data pull. How do you go to seeing a pattern first, or even kind of seeing that direction?
Yeah, it usually starts with a point of curiosity. It's like you have your hypothesis. So in the case of the data, it's thinking about, oh, I wonder if, a person who churns is different than a person who's active, right? And it sounds like an obvious thought, right? But what is the next step? So I'd go a layer down and I'd say, okay, what can I learn about a particular behavior of a churn member versus an active member? Oh, let me look at something like how often do they post? Do the posts that they make get strong engagement? Do they receive likes and comments equally? And they probably don't. So then that's a good starting point. Then we dig in, we look at that data, we segment the population between active and churn, look at the behavior of their actual posting and the reception of how that post is landing within the community. And there are some very interesting things there that starts kind of asking those right questions. But it definitely starts from a place of curiosity of like, I wonder if I can do this. And in an escape room, it'd be, can I move this shelf, or does this drawer open? Is there a key? Same idea, right? You have to have that base hypothesis, and it's just coming into it with an open mind.
I like actually the starting point of what does the person that churns look like versus what does the person that stays look like. And then getting the clues from there, what we can do to kind of help the person that churns to take the actions that the successful person takes. So
Yeah.
that's really, really interesting. Are there things that you're seeing across kind of all communities that you would also say kind of translate more into all types of businesses that try to retain customers? Or is it every community kind of is unique and depending on the setup, on the person, and on the secret sauce, it's different?
Yeah, there's definitely some trends that I think translate pretty well generically and universally across all communities. I would say something like that is post activity. So community members who are not posting and not getting good feedback or a good reception of engagement, they definitely churn a good amount more across the board. And I've seen percentages as low as 30% fewer likes or comments, all the way up to like 55, 60%. That is insane to me that a person can have that much fewer by being a person who churns. And so what does that make you think? Well, if you have active members who are below the activity of a person who normally churns, that is a person who is at high risk. And that is a person I would want to encourage to take part in posting themselves and maybe other additional value add to provide.
Yeah. You know what? I would be really curious to see if it is, and I'm not sure, if that's possible, but if you take a person that's a part of many communities, if their posting behavior and the response towards the post is the same kind of in similar communities, because for me, it's a little bit of a question as into, do we as community owners also need to add that layer of educating somebody on how to show up in a community so that you actually get the most out of it? So, is it a skill that kind of every community owner should incorporate in the onboarding? Or is it something that, maybe the person is just not vibing with your tribe?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I think there's a part of it where general etiquette in posting, I think, varies greatly among different members. But I would say, yeah, every community has its own fingerprint, and their own DNA. And I think showing up in one is very different than showing up in another. And a quick example of that would be, is it a value-based approach post where you're trying to provide value to the community? I would say the Skool games is like that, where maybe sharing wins and camaraderie is more valued, like in the Skool community in general. That is typically a better performing post. And we see that all the time if the same post in both communities, you see which one is it leading more with value, is it leading more with rapport building and sharing a win or something?
Hey, Evelyn here. I just quickly wanted to hop on to encourage you to sign up to my newsletter. When you do that, you'll not only be informed as soon as a new episode drops, but you also get access to my exclusive Growth Goodie Bag. That is a collection of highly valuable resources provided by our guests and myself, tools, strategies, case studies, templates, and so much more that will help you to grow and monetize that growth journey. If that sounds fair, then click the link and make sure to sign up to my newsletter. What are some other things that you found like super curious, maybe specifically about my community from the data?
Yeah, I think what's really fascinating looking at your community is the percentage of posts that are driven by you as a leader of your community.
Mhm.
You are insanely productive and so giving in your community. You are posting the most I've seen, honestly, in any community that I look
Oh,
at the
wow.
data for. And to see how valuable it is for folks. And I think it is a big linchpin of where they're feeling the most, cared for and the value that they're getting. And I think the rebrand that you did makes a lot of sense with that because that's what your community was asking for. So compared to other communities where it's less focused on the value that the person who has expertise, it's more about trying to get people to help each other. I would say Max's community is a lot more like that, where he has people who are all trying to win the Skool games, for instance. So
Yeah.
people sharing what's working for them, being earlier in their journey is very helpful to each other. And I would say Max still does post a lot in the community, but I think it is, maybe more balanced where somebody is looking for someone starting fresh, because sometimes Max's post is intimidating because it's so advanced for somebody who's just starting out.
Oh, yeah. I definitely see that that's really, really challenging to strike a balance between the members who've been with you, right? And they are seeing
Yeah.
the depth. And then, the new members that come in and they see all of the depth and they're like, okay, whoa, this is way too advanced for me. It's actually a reason why I started a second community, which is a paid newsletter, where I can have
Mhm.
those very long, super detailed posts for the people that kind of subscribe to, I want like all the depth. And I can see that
Mhm.
the churn rate there, I think, is insanely low. I mean, it just started, but I think I have only one person currently canceling. So,
Wow.
yeah, I think it's, and it's over 430 members. So I feel like I see the need to segment a little bit by topic and depth. And I think kind of sub communities that are a little bit more newsletter style, they kind of solve that problem. And also from the churn rate from where we have been going, maybe you can speak to that, how it has developed. I feel that that's the right approach to segment out more. Would you see that too?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think it's really important that the community itself, in terms of churn rate, it really matches the promise that is provided, that's actually delivered on. I would say that's the number one thing, right? So that's why a newsletter is so good, because it's one of those things where people are very familiar what their expectations are with a
Yeah.
newsletter.
Mhm.
So, I think Hermosi actually has an example of this, where he had a friend who was, a $30 million ARR newsletter. And what his friend was telling him was, I tried to have 3 calls a month and they increased my churn. And when he did one a month, it actually reduced the churn. So the expectation was met there. It's like, oh, I'm here for the newsletter. I don't care about the meeting as much. Maybe once a month is good. Where I imagine in your community where people want to see you, they want to hear from you, they want to get your opinion. If you had fewer Loom videos or fewer calls, I think people would be upset by that. So they really want you. So
Yeah.
I think it does matter, depending on just delivering on the promise that you've provided.
You gave me just a huge light bulb moment. I think the rebrand was that it was helping to set the right expectation before someone joined. And this is why they churned less, because it is better aligned, or through the rebrand, we're able to communicate that better. I think that this might be a huge value add for community owners if they could share from the outside. Look, this is what our community is from the inside. It's more peer support, or it's more support from me. So that's also very, very insightful to know. Super helpful. Big.
Yeah, I really like thinking about it that way. I feel like
Yeah.
it's so interesting how different the pitch. It's basically the offer, right? And thinking about how that offer plays well with the community, and that's why having multiple communities is great, because
Yeah.
if you know that there are certain folks who are not being served as well as they could be in one, transitioning them to one where it actually is meeting the expectation that they have from themselves as well as from you is such a game changer. I think it's great.
I think that's so good that we talk about it, and maybe we need to talk more about it. I feel like I'm inside the matrix with my community, right? So I'm serving, I'm connecting with people, and I'm just, I'm trying to be present there and fulfill that promise. And then you're on the outside, I mean, you are a member, but I know you're not like a customer in that sense, right?
Mhm.
You're in there because of the data. And then it's so interesting. You basically just have the stripped back code behind it, and you're looking at the data. It's like, and this is what's actually happening. So that's so interesting. And then also having the comparison with different communities, right? So this is what this blueprint of the community looks like. This is what this blueprint of the community looks like. It's very interesting to see what types of communities have you found kind of on Skool from a data point perspective. Do you see like profiles or?
Yeah, I think there's such an amazing diversity on Skool. Honestly, that's probably one of the best things about it. And I would say that the categorization of Skool communities is pretty good for the most part of just looking at the data. So like one of the things I did is I scraped the entire discovery page to kind of get a better idea of what communities there are and how does the distribution of different categories look across all of them. And I think there are some, I don't know, some people might think it's obvious, but some of the ones that are struggle are those that are less focused on helping people make money. So the business topics, financial topics, they do very well. They tend to have more members and they charge more. Where communities that are more like art-based, gaming-based, meditation, where it's personal development, they tend to do less well. I would say actually personal development is funny. It's actually in the middle because you can charge a lot for helping people along that journey, which I think a lot of people are looking for, and it has personal value. But then again, there's also communities like I know Sam mentioned, it's almost like the Bob Ross of Skool. He has some of the lowest churn rate. And I love that. Or the goat lady who has, a community about taking care of your goats. So I would say that definitely the finances lean more heavily towards those that are helping people make money. But those creative endeavors, I think there is a place for them. I think people haven't quite solved how to build the best of those communities to get the kind of traction that I think others are in the space who are really focused on MRR.
I can totally see that. And I think it might be just also really the need in the market because of, traditional education being, I don't want to badmouth things, but I think it's fair to say that at least it translates a lot slower into traditional education, right? And when we think of the digital space, how fast things move, then it's clear why people are seeking kind of alternative routes to education. So the need might be a lot higher. The demand might be higher for those kind of solutions. How many communities are there in Skool? Do you know it on top of your head?
I haven't done a scan of it in some time, but I remember the last time I did it, I was looking, I think, at paid only, paid and public, so I could get the dollar amount. I think at the time it was like around 4,000 or 5,000, but this is from the top ones that have a discovery ranking. I'm sure there's probably a crazy number of communities that are unranked. Actually, my page I think is unranked because I'm not using it for the community board. I'm using it for payment gateway and to effectively consolidate all of the data. But yeah, it's actually interesting. I imagine now that we've crossed the 100,000 mark of members within the Skool general community, I imagine the number of communities being created today is probably a lot more than that.
Can you speak to your community a little bit more so people can kind of really get the picture of what is it that you exactly do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the Know Your Data community, and it was based on verbiage that I saw in an Alex Ramosi video where he says, you need to know your business, if you know your data, if you want to scale your business. And basically the premise of what I'm trying to do is help take off the analytical side, the data scraping, coding apart away from Skool community owners, specifically focus honestly on Skool winners and those who are have a large enough community where it's really difficult to get that data at scale. So I'm really trying to simplify that process to take it off of your plate and others like you, who that way you can spend your time doing what you love to do and improving your business while having the data to back up decisions that you want to make.
Honestly, I wouldn't have any idea where to even start because I see, the the Skool metrics that I see is how many active members I think in the overall members count. So in the beginning, I was kind of tracking manually how many people did join, how many people are new in the cancellations tab. And I mean, it's a tremendous amount of time. And all of the other data, you can't even track properly, right? So how many comments, likes, posts, etc. you have. And then you can always just go off your gut instinct. So I feel like this was such a no-brainer for me from that perspective of everything else would just be guessing. Mm-hmm. And I have made this is, I think it's my 8th community. So I still have active, not on Skool, right? I was first outside of Skool. And I tried actually to make improvements to my communities that I had outside of Skool during the last year. And it was purely gut instinct driven. So I just thought, in order to help people more, we need to optimize our systems. We need to streamline our support. And so I was just thinking I'm all on the right track, especially also because, when you have a good relationship with your customers and with your members, they don't directly tell you if they like things or don't like things, right? So it's like more listening to the silence of them just not applauding, but I was not smart enough at that time to wrap my head around that. So we went forward with those things. And the problem is that you only see the damage like months after if you don't have the data to immediately, if you don't have solid data to look at it, you just months after see, okay, why is churn so high? Why, is our ads performance down because the positive word of mouth, is going down. So it was a really, really costly mistake to go with just the hypothesis and then also not measuring what is actually happening in the communities. And so I just didn't want to replicate that mistake at all. And also didn't want to build something before I have the data to know what are people actually looking for. And now through this data, I'm actually leaner than ever with the setup, right? Which is obviously more cost efficient, but also now that I am starting to add help in, I know exactly where I can add it, where it wouldn't affect the member experience. And so that's what the data really allowed me to do.
I love that. Yeah, I think you're doing everything right that you can do right. Honestly, you're such a great entrepreneur, Evelyn, and I feel like
it's that this time around. It's last year at this.
But
time,
that's the beauty.
The
to me, sometimes you have to go through the struggle, right? And that's when it really sticks. And like I can't tell you how many times I've made horrible mistakes in my business that left me scars enough that the next time I was, given the same scenario, I changed my behavior. I actually learned. And, like Alex always says, that's how you know that you've actually gotten mastery or something or learned something is do you change your behavior given the same circumstance? And you do that incredibly well. And I think for most entrepreneurs, it is hard to feel you feel the pang and you want to just keep trying the same thing to get it right. But when you pivot and when you solve it, then it really works. And I applaud you for that. That's amazing. And I'm very happy to hear that the data is helping to do that.
It has been such a game changer. And it's also the reassurance, right? Are we on the right track? Are we doing the right things? Is where we spend our time actually moving the needle. I would want to talk about your mistakes in a second. But before that, I wanted to kind of dive into something that I found so curious when we spoke the first time, because I was just saying, maybe the person listening is in the beginning of their journey and they're like, well, I'm not having a lot of data to look into. And I want to tell the story of how you have been tracking your time for years at this point, I think up to the minute of exactly what you are working on. And I think every entrepreneur that's kind of in the beginning, that is the first thing, the first type of data that they should actually start to measure is where do I spend my time? I would love if you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I 100% agree with that. I think this is the easiest way to get started, just to see where you are and how much time is available to you. So I've been tracking my time, and the smallest increment I use 15-minute intervals for the last 10 years. So in all of my corporate jobs, 9 to 5, I tracked all of my time this way, categorized, detailed what the task was that I was doing. And when I started my business, it was even more important because I was balancing both things. And then transitioning full-time on the business, I track the same thing. And for me, it's kind of like a nice accountability piece, but also it's reflective. Every week, I look at my last week, I look at my sprints, and I try to see like, am I spending the time in places where I need to be spending my time to improve my business? Or am I doing stuff that I really shouldn't be doing? I should delegate it, or I should slice off that arm and focus on the right things. So for those who are just starting and they don't have data or they don't feel clear on what they're doing, absolutely. The easiest thing you can do is track your time. It's like if you're trying to, diet and you want to track your nutrition, your macros, same idea, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I can't imagine trying to lose weight and never having the tool of a scale or, any of these ideas to measure your food even, right? And what your intake is. So I would say that's the first step. But yeah, I've been doing that for a long time and I am a huge data nerd. Plus all the time tracking makes it even nerdier.
I love this so much. I had this big aha moment. It was in 2020 when I was still running my agency and I tried to build up that coaching business on the side and I started the membership and I was just constantly overwhelmed. And I already had my daily self-management checklist. So I was doing Eisenhower and I think that already helped me a lot. But I started to write down for a couple of weeks exactly what I was doing. And this is the biggest kind of wake up call if you've never done this before, because your actually productive time and the time spent on the things that you should be doing that move you forward is so much lower than you think. I think I was down to 2.5 hours of like genuinely productive tasks a day. And the rest of the time, I would, for example, and I'm not saying don't help people for free. I built a lot of my business actually helping people for free, then having a testimonial. Eventually, they would want to become a paid client. But I had a few, less than a handful of people I would keep helping for free for nothing in return. And, at one point, you kind of just have to make a decision to, start saying no or start setting boundaries. And for me, that was the surprising or that was the big wake up call, that it was basically working a part-time job for free people.
Yeah.
I just couldn't set a boundary. It was really crazy. And, obviously then I eventually managed to set the boundary and reset the expectation. It was not a nice experience, because it was, weird dynamic.
Yeah.
But holy cow, it freed up so much of my time and gave me so much of my life back. And I think that, maybe people don't have dysfunction in that area, but I see a lot of people when I work one-to-one with them, when I give them the task, they're in constant content consumption mode, right?
Yeah.
Or they just bought something and now they're half executing on that before switching back to another task when this piece gets hard. So do you ever catch yourself, or do you still catch yourself doing things like that?
Oh, absolutely. But for me, it gives me the peace of mind to know that I am measuring it. So I know like my working time, I measure my personal time, I don't. And to me, that is actually a really important thing. So I kind of do it reverse now. At the beginning, it was more about keeping myself accountable, making sure that I could be consistent and disciplined. Now it's such a part of me I love to work, that I use the time tracking to help me realize, okay, I've worked enough. I'm at 100+ hours this week. I can, take some time to do something else or pay attention to other things that I enjoy outside of my business. So I'm kind of using it reverse. But I would say for those who are starting out, or especially during the struggling parts of your business, which there are always many, that extra kind of microscope on what it is you're doing is so helpful. It's so helpful to be able to look at that and point at that. And I also think it does build discipline. I feel like as a business owner, people think, oh, I can't wait to start my business because then I can choose when I want to work. And the real truth is that you always are working. When you're super serious about it and you're, what you eat, what you have, the roof over your head matters, you will only want to work to make sure you have those things. And yeah, I would say starting with time tracking is a great place to start if you're struggling with where you're spending your time.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think a lot of people might not know that that's their actual struggle. And also what you just said is so true as well. Just being able to be consistent with tracking your time, that consistency of just doing that one task actually is contagious, and it touches other areas where you it's almost like flipping a switch, right? Now you're showing up in that mode, and it just helps you to really stay kind of focused and almost, is it called a keystone habit? When I think there's such a thing.
I think in Atomic Habits, there's something of that term. It's something you come back to, right? I think of like Westworld actually, where they have their loop right? And there are some things that will help keep you grounded that you do every day, right? And I think, exercise is a good one for people, taking a walk. For me, time tracking. I have a 700-day Duolingo streak because it's something I cared to do that just, and so I would always tell people, think about what things do you do every day, like
Mhm.
truly every day without fail. And what are those things that are hard to do right now? What are those things that you would wish you would do every day? And if you spend your time doing that thing you want to get good at a little bit every day, you would make a world of a difference a year from now, 10 years from now, a month from now, even, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just commitment, discipline.
I would love to touch kind of on two things. First, of the Duolingo, what languages are you learning? And then also I would love to know, how do you handle love to when you love working so much? I'm also in that boat, with kind of your family, other responsibilities, expectations.
Both good questions, both hard. So the easy one I'll start with. So for Duolingo, I'm learning Russian because my
Oh,
girlfriend is
cool.
Russian and
Hmm.
she's a native speaker of Russian. She's bilingual and speaks English, obviously, so we can communicate. But I want to learn badly. So one day when we have children, I can hopefully contribute to that because I don't speak Cantonese, which is what my parents speak. And I wish I did.
Yeah.
And both my parents, of course, fluent in both English and Chinese. But so that's my streak in Duolingo. And your second question about, I did actually remind me of your second question, so I answered proper.
Integrating the love for work,
Oh, yes.
self-personal responsibilities, and also I think it's desires to kind of be present in other areas, but when you love work so much, it can consume you.
It's hard. It's hard. So my girlfriend also works in my business. I
Okay.
poached her from nursing, funny
Mhm.
enough. And I would say that it's even harder, right? When you mix those things. I know Alex and Layla work in the same business
Mhm.
together. So for me, I think there's needs to be a balance where you separate the work from personal life. And
Yeah.
then there is obviously some kind of, at least a minimum viable amount that you need to invest in your friendships, your family, and of course your relationship. And for me, that has always been a struggle. It's difficult. I always feel like I'm in a mode of, oh, well, if I just finish this next thing, when this client is done, then I can, focus on the other stuff. But I would say sprinkle it through. That is what I've found to be a solution: is don't wait for a big milestone because it'll never come.
Yeah.
Like when people are, in need, when that person calls that you really care about, pick up the phone, have the good conversation. You will find time to make the other work happen. But
Mhm.
that opportunity that is serendipitous, someone reaching out or someone needing help,
Mhm.
I never shy away from that. I'm notoriously very bad at my own boundary in this case, but it's so important to me. I just keep that circle very small, and that's how I manage the balance of that.
Yeah. That's good. And it's a little bit relieving to know that I'm not the only one struggling with that. I think it's interesting, right? Because first we all kind of are. I think it's often the story that you think, oh, I will be my own boss, then I make my own time, then I'm flexible. And then it's like you have to become someone who truly loves what they do every single day so much that you're like, well, if I would sell this successfully tomorrow, I would probably just start the same thing again.
Right? What a funny paradigm that is. It's so ironic how it actually works. And
Yeah.
it's funny too, because I definitely know a lot of folks who want to start the business for the freedom, for the money, of course, all this stuff, but they tend to pivot to something else or they give up at the point when it gets really hard. And they say, I'm not enjoying it as much, or I don't think I'm passionate about it. And I think the opposite is true. If you do the thing long enough, you
Yeah.
will become passionate, and you have to fall in love with your business over and over and over again. You have to find the thing that you enjoy about it and do the things still, what is required that you don't enjoy about it, to get to that next step where you've done it so long, you know what to look for and you are finding fulfillment through it. I think it's very backwards from what conventional wisdom about entrepreneurship and what like
Mhm.
most people
Yeah.
talk about. It's very rare.
Yeah. I think the freedom looks very different from the inside than it does from the outside. But it does feel, I think, free because you can do the things you love and you are competent in the things you love. So I think it's just different than what I thought it would look and feel like when I just started.
Absolutely. It really is. It always is. And for those who are just getting started, I feel like people want to have the perfect idea. And I will tell you, I had millions of ideas. I have a list on my phone, literally incredibly long from like 2002. And the thing is, most of the ideas, any one of them could have worked if I actually put in the time. But it's more about just picking a thing and trying it, experiment. I would always just push people to just try it. If you're excited about an idea, try it because you'll find out very, very quickly. If it is so miserable, then you know you couldn't do it for a year, 5, 10 years, then it's probably not the right business for you. But imagining how it could be is not the same thing as actually giving it a try.
Oh my goodness. I would love to visit your idea graveyard. Before that, I just want to say I see this also with people's niches when it comes to, starting their coaching business or starting their membership business. I will always say to them, your first is just a burner. Like it's just for you to figure out the kind of techniques and
Yes.
what goes into it, but don't get attached to it. Just a decision, go with it, build it, fail with it, and then build the one that you actually, discover through that process. But it's revealing itself in the doing so much more than it is something that you can construct kind of perfectly. Can you share some of your favorite graveyard ideas where you're like,
oh my goodness, there's so many.
I think that this would have been really, really good. Like looking back now that you have the skills and the experience, if you would approach some of those ideas with the same skills and experience, what would be kind of your lowest hanging fruit and what would be like, oh yeah, that would have probably been a really bad idea.
I can tell you one of the business I did actually do and why it failed and how I would approach it now. So I had one of my first businesses out of college was an ad business. I called it We Adorn. And basically the premise was I went around the campus and I hired students to place 2 pieces of paper on their dorm room door for me once a month. And they would just leave it up for the month. And it was basically advertising. So I went to all the local businesses around my school and sold the ad space. And the reason I came up with it was because when I was an RA, so I was a resident assistant, so I was responsible for my floor. And I remember when my resident director told us they had like ads to place for the school, we were disallowed from putting it on student stores. And I was like, that's interesting. Why is that? And they said, well, they pay room and board, so we're not actually allowed to advertise our general school-wide stuff on the door. And I said, well, I wonder if the reverse is true. And so the thing that didn't work about that business was eventually I got shut down by the school because I had so many people putting up ads that were not vetted by the university themselves that they shut me down. So I would say in the future, one of the things I've learned to do, and I would probably do for that business, is try not to have to rely on something where I'm the rebel and I could be shut down at any point in time. I probably would have worked through the university officially and really framed my offer to being helpful to the goals that they share, giving them review rights and things like that, that I know are important today that in my naivete, I did not consider. I was like, I just want to gung-ho get the ground running. So that was one of my ideas that died, that's how I would revive it today. I'd go through the official channel and figure out a better offer as a win-win.
But that's interesting because there was product to market fit, right? And that just was a little bit of the networking component missing, probably.
Yes. Yeah. The official stamp of approval is a big one. It's like even Skool today. I would always check with Kirby or Sam if I have some crazy thing I want to do in automation just to make sure it's okay. Because I don't want to step on anyone's toes, do anything that would hurt the system. I just want to make sure that it makes sense. So like automating posts, for instance, is not something I do because I know Sam feels strongly about he doesn't want communities to be automated in that way. Or something like a bulk DM, I feel better about because it's messaging something you would do normally. It's just you don't want to spend hours doing it. You can automate that.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know we can automate that. We need to talk about it.
Yes, yes, we can.
I just wanted to ask you, how do you, Skool seems like another school that could shut you down, but that's so good that you're in such close proximity as well with the people that make the decisions here. I think that's also so incredible about Skool that you have the opportunity to, get that feedback and that the hierarchies are kind of so flat that actually every single member has one support ticket away from potentially having an okay by Sam. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. I really applaud Sam for what he does. I know he is very close to the ground of talking to members. It's incredible. Like I try to do that with my clients and I fall short all the time. So the fact that he constantly keeps this up is incredible. So Sam, if you're ever watching, thank you for that.
I think it's awesome, and it's such a unique space that he has built. What kind of communities do you think, or what kind of businesses could also benefit from having Skool communities that you maybe not see on the radar yet?
I think there's a lot of things that people don't consider because they're afraid it won't make money or that won't make a good community. And I would say, I think the reason that is because of the self-limiting belief that people have that my topic is not good enough. Nobody cares about this. And yet I think the most rabid communities are those that came out of your own personal desire to be part of that community yourself. So I would say things like D&D has an incredibly strong community. I don't see, I maybe one D&D community. So, building communities around existing spaces that people are very passionate about, like board games, tabletop, I think would be interesting. Metaverse is something I kind of do as well that I'm surprised there isn't more of it. So I think there's a lot of potential for people to experiment with something that they want to see in the world themselves, put that on Skool. And I think those are going to be the most exciting communities to find on Skool as it gets bigger and it becomes more diverse.
Yeah, I love that so much. I just recently joined the Doctor Who community and I was like, what?
That's amazing.
So I love it. Now I'm going to give it away completely. I'm a grandma. I don't understand the metaverse. I don't even know what's happening, but I know something is happening. Can you give me the grammar rundown crash course?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big fan of the 2D metaverse. So this is, if you think of like Pokemon or Among Us, like top-down 2D browser-based, because it's so accessible. When I say metaverse, I'm not talking about Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse with the Oculus Rift on your face. I think we're still far away from that. So just to start with that clarification. But
it has
basically,
nothing to do with Facebook, actually.
Exactly. It has nothing to do with Facebook. Facebook just took over the term and literally changed the name of their company from Facebook to Meta to do that. And
I think they also took over Facebook like that.
Right? So they're funny. So I just want to preface that when I say metaverse, it's not that metaverse. But the 2D browser based, what I love about it is it's multiplayer. You often have something like proximity audio. So you control a character and you can move around your avatar. And when your avatar is next to another avatar, you're automatically connected audio video. When you walk away, it automatically dissipates. So that is amazing. It's beautiful, the connections that can be made when it's serendipitous like that. And I think it's a great supportive feature eventually for Skool because Skool is asynchronous with the community board. And people want, a live chat, voice, a mail, voice messages. And I think having a platform, although for now separate, to have that kind of serendipitous engagement where you can walk around and just explore and meet people is amazing. We actually had Kirby join the Max's metaverse launch we did for him. And Kirby said he saw more people's faces from Skool than he had in like the last year in one event. And that's the magic that I feel like the metaverse can capture, is to really get FaceTime with people.
That's so cool. And that's also full circle kind of back to the online events, right?
Yes. Yep, exactly. And so using these platforms, I'm actually building my own as well from scratch, which is not recommended, not easy, but it's something I reinvest my profits into because to the point I was saying earlier, I don't ever want to get caught where the platform I'm using no longer works or supports what I want to build. I will have to build it myself. And it's just, I'm fully bootstrapped. So that's kind of always my thinking. But yeah, with metaverse, I would say we should, one of the things we'll have you do, Evelyn, is play my escape room game in the metaverse. And I'll give you the best example of what it's actually like. So if you've ever done a physical escape room, to see how we translated those elements to a 2D metaverse environment, I think we'll probably explain it better than anything else.
So cool. I'm so curious to check it out. What are some other gamification elements that you've seen that kind of work well for communities?
I think the best way to tie real behavior with accolade within the community is the strongest thing you can do to incentivize a gamification. So for instance, like I do like the system that Skool has where, getting a like on your post gives you a point or a like on a comment. But you can already see where that can get abused, right? Where
Mhm.
if people are just posting a ton or commenting a ton, you can get that. So I would say something like helping another member, like maybe providing an about page review or something, and tracking that actual activity where maybe both parties are, checking off the box some form digitally that they've done that and the value has been provided. I think that is such a strong way to gamify.
Mhm.
So if you can measure other actions that you can take that are valuable to another community member and track it is game changing for
Yeah.
gamification.
Oh, that's so cool that you say that. This gives me an idea. We have this post in the community where we have members helping members. Some of our members that are in the beginning, they have not coached someone one-to-one or consulted someone one-to-one or gave, any form of help on a Zoom call. And so
Yeah.
I try to help them kind of match with each other to post their free session. And then you offer a session and you
Yes.
consume others. So if this is something that we could kind of track and link and incentivize, that will be so helpful, I think, for members because, they need to collect this experience as well. Kind of going back to doing the things that really move the needle. And it's things that we can often procrastinate if we don't know how to move forward with them. So I really know that that will be a game changer. So that's possible.
Yeah, I love that's absolutely possible. And I love that idea. And in order to track it automatically, using something like the metaverse is great for that because all of the tracking is behind the scenes. So a person doesn't have to send or fill out a Google sheet. It's often something I see people do in their variations of Skool games. They require the user to do additional work, which I think takes away from the experience. So we basically set up an environment where if your avatar jumps in the metaverse and you're with another avatar for X number of time, we mark you as done. And you can even have a little form in there that says we did what we were supposed to do at the time. Thank you very much. And you don't have to write anything. You just, click a button while you're there and it's logged.
Oh, cool. That could even automate the kind of feedback, because they should give each other feedback, right? On how was it so they can learn. That's so cool. So interesting. I'm
Yeah,
so
we can
excited
test it out.
I'm so excited, all the things, that we can still build. Can you, for the person listening, maybe summarize a few takeaways for the beginner or the entrepreneur that's currently struggling, and then end with letting people that are further in the journey that, might be playing the games or be at the revenue level of a winner, let them know how they can find you and reach out?
Yeah, so I would say the main takeaway in my mind is to just pick the first thing you're interested in doing and go for it. Just go for it. I feel like that is what holds people back is their fear that the thing you're going to pick is not going to work or you will fall out of love with it. And I say all of those things are okay. It's okay to just try. And so I would say the shorter you can make the thought to the action, the better. So just try it. And then you can always try again if it fails. Like that is a true entrepreneurship is like, don't be afraid, be brave and go try it. And I guess the second thing I'd say is if you don't know what to track or what metric to think about, absolutely track your time. I think it's the simplest thing. And even if you're in a 9 to 5 today, that was one of the most helpful things. I climbed the corporate ladder very well because I was able to provide this kind of data to my managers and my bosses where they were saying, oh, here's your success factors evaluation. Tell me what you did. And I would be such a nerd and I'd have all these graphs saying like, here's how many hours I spent on XYZ projects and activities. Here's the people who helped me, who I helped. And they said, wow, this is insane. So they helped me kind of get to that next salary level faster. And then for those who are just starting, look at what you're spending your time on. If you're consuming more than you're doing and creating, I would say that's something to look at. You want to create more than you consume. And often the thing that you consume the most for fun is probably an area of interest if you're looking to start a business, right? You might as well pick something you're already spending your time doing. So I would say that's a good kind of shortcut hack to figure out. Because I know that's the other thing. People are like, well, I don't know what my niche is. Where do you spend your time? So
That's
all of those
so
things come
smart.
together.
I love that. That's such a hack as well, because you will have such an advantage if you already spending your time there. So good.
Yep, absolutely. And funny enough, when I did the data, I was doing both metaverse and the data. And I was on a walk with my girlfriend and I was telling her about the data that I'm looking at. And she says, why isn't that your offer? How fast would it be to come up with like a dashboard or something? And I said, I don't know, like 24 hours, I could code something. She said, that's insane. Why aren't you go home right now and do it? And I did. And that was the first version of it. So I give her all the credit in the world for putting me on that journey because she saw me spending all my time doing it. And it was a good realization to say, maybe I should build my offer around this because I'm already doing it.
And it's so perfect and needed. And you like it. But that's funny too, right? Because we're so close that we can't see it.
Right? Exactly. And so the advice to Skool winners and those who have a big community or successful community, I would say, try to think about what is the smallest thing that you need to look at that is very specific. So if you have a burning question, solve that first. Figure out how you can get that. And if you want it to be automated or something like scanning of your community, I can absolutely do that. It's skool.com/@nerd is my handle. Feel free to DM me. But yeah, I would say figure out what the one burning question is that you have about your community. And the more deep it is, the better, because there is probably an answer there that would help you remove the biggest barrier, give you the greatest win, highest priority, if you answer that question for yourself all the way through.
I love this. I have to just dig a little bit deeper here because I think that the ability to ask the right questions, it's a skill in itself. And sometimes we're lacking that. I just knew when we started working, I already kind of had my reference data from my Stripe, right? So I knew that for me, a good churn rate is below 10%. And in Skool, it was 20%. So I was like, what is going on here? And my question actually was, I saw a lot of declined payments, right? So I was like, is there something with declined payments? And that's also when I started to work with Ryan, and he was like, oh yeah, he has some cool stuff. But I mainly was like really interested in, I want to know if the declined payment is a gut feeling or if it's actually a thing. And so what are some of the questions that you would think a Skool game winner could look at? I mean, probably they don't even know what their churn is right now, right? Based on Skool.
Yeah, I think people do have figured out how to calculate it, which is good. They should. Again, just looking at the numbers of people who churn. And for those, just the simple calculation that I think will help set everyone on this, looking at the same metric. Because funny enough, when you hear churn rate, the calculation is unclear. Yeah. So the one that Sam uses and that I use as well is you take your number of people that are starting your community at the beginning of a month. So you have 100 people in your community, and then on June 1st, it's 100 people. You want to see how many people at the end of the month have churned. So let's say 10 people churned at the end of the month. Then you take that number and divide it by the number that you started with at the beginning of the month. So that would be 10% churn in that case. Super, super simple. But if everyone can kind of coalesce on the same calculation, I think that'd be really helpful about what we're all talking about. Because people do rolling averages, people do all kinds of crazy stuff, as did I. But I think getting common language on that is helpful.
Oh, I think, Kevin, you should so offer like a $300 kind of where are you with churn and quick win potential. I think that, that would be such a great entry point for you as well. And for people, it will be such a wake up call because I knew roughly where I am with my churn rate, right? But I also calculated it manually, which I'm not sure, maybe I'm just dumb. But I was going through like all the people, like when did the person join? And so it's like I didn't, when you export it, you don't have the date when they joined, right? So
exactly. Yeah. So that's a SAM feature we would need. That is effectively what I do in automation is I scan all of the fields. So you're doing the right thing. So you're doing exactly the right thing is looking at the dates and
so there's
making
no
sure
easier way basically, right?
Unfortunately, it's very manual today, unless you automate it. But like for those who are interested in automating it and they want to do it themselves, and I'm not saying it's not a shameless plug. If you want to do it yourself, I would say you look into like Selenium automation, which is browser-based automation, which is what I do, and Python scripting, because you can automate the process of scraping each of those fields from the pages and then put it into an easy-to-use report. Otherwise, if your community is small, just take some time and like copy paste, as bad as that sounds, that will give you a good start.
I mean, if you have a smaller community, I think that's, completely fine. But if you are at that point where a $300 is like an hour of your time, you might as well like make that trade. And now I'm shamelessly plugging you because I'm just convinced service. But I would say then, get that insight into the data first, so you kind of know what you're working with, like truly. I'm also, in some like groups where we strategize around churn and other things and connected with different people in different kind of WhatsApp chats. And I really think our time at this point is, our hour is worth so much, right? That we really need to be very mindful with what our word is also worth a lot, right? We need to hold ourselves accountable as in what we're telling our community. So when we make a gut decision about, the hypothesis is that this will improve the community, we have to stick it out. And then we see kind of the improvements or damages that we did a few months down the line, but that might be $30,000 in monthly current revenue lost later. So I really think that it's so important to give yourself like the step back, saying, okay, based on the data that we see, what is this kind of smallest possible commitment that I can make that we believe will move the needle, right? And some are just small things, like you guys got me on doing the engagement posts like multiple times a week. And now we rank, I think, at 130, and now we're down to the 63 in discovery on the pages. So
that's
it's just
amazing.
like really, really small things maybe that you can make first before you make the big changes, like, well, we're rebranding our community completely.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Figuring out what that question is. I think most Skool owners do know, especially when you're at a certain level, it's probably gnawing at you. And funny enough, like something Max was just wondering about is, did he set his level rewards proper? Because there are some people, they just started a Skool games inside of their community and people were earning points so fast. And he was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm giving away like lifetime forever. Like now, does that mean I have like churn on the back end and the front end? Is that a thing? And so one of the things we did for Max is we scanned his entire community, every post for every point, so we could extrapolate what is the likelihood of acceleration of points earned by any member over a period of time, to see how we could level set his rewards and tiers so that he wasn't worried about, okay, is this a problem or not? So yeah, those are the kinds of questions that I think are meaty. If they're keeping you up at night, those are great things to spend the time to think about.
That's so good. It's also reassuring, kind of saying, hey, actually, I could ask Kevin, do you see any of because, for example, I'm in the perspective, I don't even know what kind of data we have available, right? So my kind of vision is really limited with that. And it's good that you said that, because for the next question, I might just knock, at your WhatsApp door and be like, Kevin, do you think there is a data that we could, or, there's numbers that we can look at to get a hypothesis about that question? So really excited about that.
And I would say the secret is there is always data. There is always data somewhere, right? So if you have the question, it's just a matter of what tool do you use to measure it and what does it take? But it's always great having those questions. And like, I have so many notes I take, especially in Notion, where if I think of something that I want, I have to write it down. If you don't write it down, it doesn't exist. So it's like a good general policy for people. If it's important to you, write it down and revisit whatever that place you go to make sure that you're getting every good thought that you have and actually taking action on it. It's like number one thing other than time tracking.
Yeah, fully agree with the writing down, and wish that writing was such a bigger part of many people's lives, because it's a huge difference also looking back at what you wrote and having that reflection. That's for me the newsletter now. And it's so funny because it kind of becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because you write it and then you write the next one building up on the last one. You're like, oh yeah, that's what I did. This is why, it worked. So it's so good.
I can't tell you how many times I've solved the problem because I was going through my time tracking and I saw something, a note or something I did even a year or 2 years ago. And I'll realize, oh my gosh, that solution would work for the problem I have right now. I'm like, that's actually insane. I can't believe that is true, but it is. And so the self-reflection is actually huge. There's actually a study on doctors where they found that the thing that made a doctor like an A tier versus a mid-tier doctor was how often do they reflect on their performance. That was like the number one thing, which is crazy to me. And they were even looking at surgeons in particular, where, you imagine that is an insane gap of skills between the worst and the best. And this particular surgeon, he ended up getting a coach who was another surgeon to watch what he was doing. And he said that the notes that the person watching him gave were insane for him because he wasn't aware of so many of those things. And so that's why I'm a huge fan of your community and others like it, because sometimes it is so helpful just to have another person who's looking at what you do say, hey, have you tried XYZ? Because it just gets you out of your frame of mind. And if you have the time tracking, you could share that. I have a bunch of interns who did like a summer internship with my company, and I asked them to track their time. And one of them did it religiously, and I was able to give him so much more feedback. He ended up actually getting a job at Meta, funny enough.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And making more in salary than I made when I left corporate America, his very first job, making a higher salary than I made. And I couldn't be more proud to see that. And I think, again, time tracking was a helpful tool in getting there.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think we should end it there so everybody goes out and starts their time tracking right now.
Yes, go start your time tracking out there as you're watching.
And first task you track is that you look up skool.com @nerd for Kevin. Give him a follow.
Thank you so
he
much.
always shares so much value. And, if you're a games winner, if you're in that kind of realm, I can just highly recommend working with him.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Appreciate it.